we've got a huge skill shortage in the world, in the profession, right? That we don't have enough landscape architects to deliver what the world needs of us. We have a huge opportunity as landscape architect to really address all three crises that we face through the work we do.
Hi and welcome to the newest episode of Urbcast. And today we will continue with the series of episodes that I recorded at the Urban Future Conference in Rotterdam as the media partner of the conference. But today I will actually combine the opportunity of being at the Urban Future Conference together with the landscape architecture series that I'm having in my podcast. Because during the conference, there are many very interesting people working with the landscape architecture field. And undoubtedly one of them was Ludo Pittie, who is the director and head of landscape division at WSP, which is over 60,000 people strong engineering company working with buildings, working with cities, and also with landscape architecture. And today our conversation actually will be focused a lot on the professional development. It will be focused also on the diversity within the field and also how to grow your understanding of the field, but also how to grow yourself as a person and also as a landscape architect. I was very curious about how WSP and Ludovic is approaching landscape architecture as a profession, as a field, and how do they work with various challenges that we face in the profession, in the field, such as very low budgets or big expectations at the same time. So without further ado, I really wanted to invite you to the discussion, very, very interesting discussion with Ludovic Pittie from WSP. Let me just start by saying, Ludo, welcome to podcast, welcome to Urbcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Marcin.
I'm so happy to have you here, especially because this year I'm focusing on this series that I have about landscape architecture. And I've been talking so far to many architects, landscape architects, primarily from Denmark or Copenhagen, but not only. And I think that you could bring a fresh perspective and fresh lens on landscape architecture as discipline. But I think we will talk more broadly about cities overall. You are working at WSP and you are also living in the UK. So this is totally a new perspective of landscape architecture. Could you, as a way of starting this conversation, tell the listeners something more about how did you get your interest into landscape architecture as a discipline and also urban design in a way, because it goes hand in hand in your case?
It's an interesting story. So I never thought I'd do this job, right? This job found me more than anything else. I studied science. Initially, I wanted to be an oceanographer, right? I wanted to work with dolphins. I had no intention of working in cities. Original, I know. There's one common thread behind that, which is the interest in nature, right? And that's a passion that I've kind of managed to go back to eventually. But in the French education system, I did sort of a science degree and did preparatory schools to do engineering concours, managed to pick a school in Paris called the Engineering School for the City of Paris. Got a degree in urban engineering, which was a really cool degree because we learned about all the disciplines you need to plan, design, and maintain a city. So I learned about landscape architecture, urbanism, but also architecture, transport, foundations, networks, lighting, waste management. And so it was really eye-opening to get a glimpse of how cities work, right? It wasn't intended to be knowing everything about everything, but it was making sure that we could delve into more details on the topics that mattered to us later on. And so I did a number of internships and started working in the US in project management for utilities, and then found a job as a highway engineer for a consultancy. And interestingly, one of the principals put me in touch with some of the architects who work there. because he knew I had a keen interest. And so I started straddling the engineering and architecture space early into my career. And after 5 years of doing that, I found myself in a bit of a pickle because I wasn't sure where my career would go. And I started doing research about, what could I do where? And I knew I wanted to come back to Europe because my parents were retiring. And I stumbled upon urban design. Like, big revelation, hallelujah, lights from the sky. And I was like, this is it, Because I started working on projects in Manhattan around reconstructions around Ground Zero, helping put a collage of different master plans for how downtown would look after all those projects were complete, and really started to operate in that intersection between streets, building, and people. And I think that's what lit up the spark in really delving more into that topic. And so I started applying for jobs, and I got a job with a company called Michel and started working as a senior urban designer. And so I did so much reading to upskill myself to make sure I was ready. But ultimately, nothing teaches you like learning and from your peers and working with people, working on projects, talking to communities and developing projects with them, right? And really, that's kind of how I stumbled into landscape architecture afterwards, because I ended up in a team that had urban designers and landscape architects. And so all my knowledge and all my interest in landscape architecture really has been first and foremost thanks to the exposure I've had from those amazing colleagues over the past 19 years working in the UK. And so I ended up leading a small team, and from that point on, made a real effort to understand more about the broader skill set within landscape architecture, because I felt I couldn't lead that team if I didn't really understand what they were doing, right? So I made it my mission to understand the differences between landscape planning, landscape and visual impact assessment, green infrastructures, park design, and all the various aspects of the profession beyond urban design and what I was doing in the first 10 years. And really, that's how I became an adopted child of the landscape profession, not having learned in the traditional way. But I think if any listeners doesn't know what to do for their career, don't be disheartened. A third of landscape architects do it as a second degree or a second career, even decades later after their first, because it's a topic that's so unknown when you're in school that a lot of people stumble upon it much later in life and are like, oh my God, this is what I wanted to do all my life. It's a really interesting profession where we have that ability and can welcome so many people from new backgrounds into the profession. And because it brings in and taps into so many different skills, people can always bring themselves to it later on. So it never goes to waste, right? If you did art first, you can use that. If you did product design, you can bring that. It doesn't matter what background you have, you can always bring it into the landscape profession later, which really is an interesting way to look at it.
So around 20 years ago, you said hello to the industry, to the complicated industry. If we discussed urban design, landscape architecture, and so on, architecture on its own, right? It is a very complicated field because on one hand, you see all those successful architects traveling the world, giving keynotes and so on. But also it is a very hard profession. There is a lot of competition. In many countries, the profession actually is not very well paid. I mean, when you start as a landscape architect, you are sometimes just cleaning up after the architect, so to say. So you are just planting.
Or you're given the leftovers.
Or you're given the leftovers, right? I've been just talking to founder of Lola Landscape Architects here in the Netherlands, and he said that sometimes the budget for landscape architecture for a project might be extremely tiny, like 1% of the whole budget.
Yeah, 1 to 5%
for the projects. Exactly. It's actually a tiny amount you are getting to, and you are expected to do this crazy nice public space that will be elevating the value of the whole project. Diving into that, the challenging topic of landscape architecture, how do you approach it as a team leader and also more broadly as WSP? Because as I've said previously, I've been talking mostly to landscape architects from the landscape architecture studios. So what's the difference in here, talking from perspective, actually very big engineering firm, having, I guess, around 60,000 people worldwide?
67,000, yeah. And 600 of that are landscape architects, right?
Small and a big number. at the same time.
Completely. Together, it's probably one of the biggest studios in the world, right? If you compare with others. But compared to how many other engineers we have, it's tiny. So I think we've always tried to, I think, speaking to a lot of the other leaders in the other countries, it's been interesting to see the journeys we've all been on and how similar those journeys have been in trying to assert ourselves in a company that isn't initially founded to be about design, but wanting to do more about design and reinvent ourselves. And I think that the whole changes in the company of how it evolved since I'd been there for over 8 years now, it's completely transformed from what we were doing to what we're doing now. And we'll continue, I think, to change over the years to come. So we started, I think we had about 15 people in the team, and now we have 120 plus people. So the team in itself has completely transformed in those 8 years. A lot of that has been recruitment and finding people. How we found people has changed in those 8 years as well, right? But importantly, people join the other people that they might want to work with as much as the company and the values you stand for. I think a big part of the recruitment process when we've been talking to future employees has been about explaining our ambition, our vision for the team, what were we standing for? And I think our Future Ready program has been a huge part of that because it wasn't there at first, right? When I started interviewing people in 2017, I couldn't say anything about any of that. That glimmer of vision was barely there, but it really started to crystallize in 2018, 2019. We did a whole research project on, the question was, what do we mean by future ready landscape? What is it? And it's something I presented at IFLA that then sort of completely influenced and reshaped how we saw ourselves, what united us between all other landscape architects around the world, but also gave us a story that others could relate to, right? And we started seeing people on the market coming to us saying, well, I'm really interested in future ready landscape. Like, can you tell me more about it? How does it work? And I'm really interested to actually have that impact. Because a lot of people who go into the profession do it to have an impact on the communities, on nature. It's one of those professions that actually brings those two components quite closely together. And I would say that's probably what we stand for the most and biggest difference with a small practice. Small practices have been built a lot in the past on the back of one big name, the founder. We don't have a big name in any way in that same sense, but what we have are broader visions, purpose, and drive on impact, and a set of values that we've set in terms of what we stand for and the legacy we want to leave to the communities we work with. And really, it's a shift of values. It's not better in any way, but it's just a different proposition. But I think being able to articulate what we stand for has really mattered and changed who we've been able to bring to work for us. And quality of the people we have in the team is just absolutely outstanding. I couldn't be happier and prouder of what the team looks like now, and just really excited to see where they go going forward. The diversity is through the roof. I mean, it's probably one of the most diverse team I've ever seen. It's incredible in every sense of the word. And we thrive for that diversity, right? There's something our recruitment team told me once that stuck with me, that whenever we've been reviewing CVs and profiles on LinkedIn, I've always been looking for names we didn't have. It was a very unconscious marker of seeking out diversity. And she pointed it out to me, like, you've got the most exotic names in your team. And I was like, yeah, but that's because I want that diversity. It was a subconscious thing that I was naturally looking for. And she sort of shined a light on what it meant. But I think that team has got so much to give, and they don't need me for that. I've just been there as a catalyst to help bring them together. But that's probably also the big difference with the studios, right? The business is not about me. The business is about them. It's about their growth. It's about where they go. We bring people to stay with us for a meaningful term. If they only want to stay with us for 3 to 5 years, fine, it's completely up to them. But we can give them careers for the next 10, 15, 20 years if they've got the appetite, the talent, and the drive for it. And we've got so many people who've been with us now for over a decade. It's quite incredible.
How would you use this diversity and this fantastic pool of talents to address the challenges in your projects that you have now? Because while thinking about some topics for this discussion, I think we did agree that cities are in the very specific moment right now. So the boundary between the nature and what's built is very blurred. And of course, there is also the urban sprawl. So I think that landscape architects, urban designers, they are having a big responsibility right now. How is your team addressing that? What are the challenges you work with in the urban environment?
So there's a few of them. I would say the first one we've been looking at has been neurodiversity. And it's really, again, it's personal for a lot of our staff, right? We've got members of our team who have children who are autistic. We've got others who have been diagnosed with ADHD or, different level of neurodiversity, because actually 1 in 5 of us are neurodiverse, right? And so we've made a huge effort and put together a lot of work in actually helping frame how could we design external spaces better for neurodiversity. And it's something we've done on a few projects, including a new mega 3-hectare public space outside of a new rail station in London. And it's a case study that my colleague Rick just presented at a conference in Vancouver last month. And we want to continue to do more of that, right? So it's not just personal for our staff. It's also what we can then take back to communities and share with our own teams to help them evolve how they work so we can have better impact and better outcomes. And I think the other one is obviously around climate and resilience. And I think there's a lot of lessons learned internally just between our different countries. So you coming from Copenhagen, we're talking to our Danish colleagues on a fairly regular basis and trying to learn from each other about, the approach around the cloudburst work and what can we take from that and what are the sensitivities and arguments that we can make to clients or communities or both to actually change the relationship or the perception around what makes our cities. How green does it need to be, or how green should it be? And what are the opportunities attached to that? What does it provide and how do we pay for it? What are the benefits of it? And that really is a huge space for us. I think there's probably over a third of our project that do have that climate narrative at least, because it's fundamental. But I think the beauty about the climate and nature narrative is it also brings everything else with it, because nature is circular by nature, right? So it brings stewardship and social benefits with it, like health and well-being. It brings everything. So it's a great magnifier to help crystallize a specific lens for projects that will deliver better outcome and legacy. Because I think that's change in focus for me. It's not so much about design for design's sake. It's about legacy. What are we going to leave behind through this project in the making of the project? So take every opportunity just in developing it already before it's even built to already start to build that legacy and that impact in the community. And then how far can we leverage it through the delivery and beyond? And so I think that's really where we're looking to amplify and continue to crystallize that. That's really the area that we're kind of in the middle of in terms of pivoting our focus.
If it comes to the types of the projects you work with, what's the most important in composing a team? Because there are a lot of brilliant landscape architecture offices out there. You already said that you are talking to some Danish colleagues, and Denmark and Copenhagen especially is having like this huge pool of talented architects. It's a place to go if it comes to architecture, landscape architecture as well.
And Rotterdam.
and Rotterdam as well. Sorry, I'm very Copenhagen centric, as I said, but that's why I'm stepping out and talking to you, Ludo, in this podcast. How would you collaborate with landscape architects from design offices? Because would they be your collaborators? Would they be rather, in a way, your competitors in projects?
They're both. I think, so the reality of it is we've got a huge skill shortage in the world in profession, right? We don't have enough landscape architects to deliver what the world needs of us. We have a huge opportunity as landscape architect to really address all three crises that we face through the work we do. So the role we have on projects is only going to increase in its importance and scale, and the budget is going to go from 1% to 100%, right? So I think we collaborate. We've collaborated with other landscape architects since I started at WSP in 2016, right? So we've worked with plenty UK firms, LDA, Gillespie's, Grant Associates, Camlins, you name it, small, large, medium. We've collaborated with plenty, and Publica and so many others. But also we are working with international firms. So I helped our WSP France team win the redesign of the Boulevard de la Croisette in Cannes, and that's very much a design team that's led by Atelier d'Urbanisme Roland Castro and Noeta. So, we've really much brought top-end world-class designers to redesign a world-class destination, and we've provided a very light-touch role ourselves as, from a landscape perspective, very much in an advisory capacity, and let the designers lead that piece of work. So we're able to pivot and adapt our role on projects depending on the project, and we collaborate with designers globally these days. I'm in conversation with probably 2-3 different studios in Copenhagen and many others around the world. So I think it's collaboration as something quite magical behind it. If you can find the right collaborators, people are going to want to see that the outcomes from working together will be better than if we were working on our own. Beyond the sort of we need to win some work, there needs to be an agenda behind that for how the people would approach it to create something bigger. I think that's probably how we're approaching partnering these days, and who we pick to talk to and how we develop it. It's very much about that intent in terms of values and how people work and what are they looking for from working together. And I think we've definitely seen some fantastic collaborators come forward from that. And the conversations have been utterly brilliant, been blown away just from the first couple of workshops. And so it's really as much about and how we're evolving as a practice. It's about having that maturity to be able to not so much be desperate about the partnering, but actually be able to pick the people who we think we have a great alignment with.
The right collaborator is extremely crucial thing for a successful project, but before that, there has to be also client that understands the process and has ambition. Do you think that the clients you work with, and maybe you could also mention some of the clients or at least client types, are ambitious enough if it comes to especially those public realm and landscape projects? Who of them are more forward-leaning, and what should be done for more of them to be like that?
So I think we're definitely seeing clients being far more educated these days. I would say there's probably more good clients than they were 20 years ago. We've seen there's definitely been a broader awareness about placemaking, the role of urban design, the role of landscape, the role of nature, what future mobility and technology is doing, and how our streets and our environment is changing, and the crises that we all face. I think so. We definitely in a different environment, and I would say we do have plenty of great clients in a lot of profiles. Some of them have been spending their whole life in public sector. Some others have moved around, and I've seen both sides. But overall, I think it starts with people having some clarity about what do they want to achieve in terms of the vision. And if it's not them someone in the leadership in the council having that vision. And I think that that's quite fundamental for successful projects, irrespective of the client organization. Just that drive and that ambition and being able to tap into that. Because if it exists and if you're able to have that in the leadership.
What is your ideal type of client?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I've met a few of them, but I'm not sure there is one type. I think if there was one type, it'd be boring. I think through my career, I've reinvented my own careers 3, 4, 5 times. It's always building on the past. And I think our clients do the same, right? So in a way, I don't want an ideal client. I want someone else who's also as dynamic and changing and challenging themselves to continue to innovate and see better outcomes out there and really amplify how far can our money go to deliver more and better. So I think maybe that's it. Maybe that's the attribute, right? Just ambition is already, I think if there's one attribute, so there's one attribute I look for in recruitment, and it tends to be what I call curiosity, intellectual curiosity, someone who thrives for knowledge. And I guess from a client perspective, that's probably ambition, right? Someone who doesn't matter what level they're at in the organization, as long as they have that in ambition that they're going to push for and drive for, that's half the battle.
Changing topic from the client side to more on the internal side, you give a lot of attention to the talented workforce, to the talented crew, to colleagues working in landscape architecture, having very diverse backgrounds and approaches to projects. And this is one of the key reasons I started this series. I want to share advice with young people, young designers, landscape designers, and so on. Some people might be lost because, as I said at the beginning, it is competitive and challenging field. You said that you reinvented yourself and your career a couple of times. Could you share your experience on how did you did that and how did you rediscover yourself? I mean, now you ended up within this broad landscape field, but you started as a highway engineer. I mean, that's a big change. That's a big span. So as some sort of advice to people who are starting their own journey, what could be this one specific piece of advice you would share with them?
Yeah, of course. One piece of advice: never stop learning. And I don't mean that from a CPD perspective, right? It's not about logging the hours for your chartership or saying it because it's cliche. It's never stop learning beyond your own profession. Never stop learning in part, join the dots that are not being joined yet. Learn about coding, learn about gaming, learn about finance. It's because actually one of the joys of the landscape profession is how it continues on evolving and where it hasn't evolved yet, right? Especially in the space of embedded carbon and net zero and neutrality. There's so much more we can continue to do and shape. So no profession stands still. And I think the attribute in terms of continuing your career is being able to carve what is authentic to you in the first place, right? Being able to understand what you stand for and being able to align that with what you do. And the more the two become in alignment, the more you're going to be passionate about what you do and the bigger impact you're going to have. And that's probably going to change as you mature and evolve yourself. And as you seek new knowledge, you can pivot into slightly different areas. We've seen that with some members in our teams who started as landscape architect, and now Juliana's our BIM manager, right? So she's completely pivoted out of producing landscape drawings and developing concepts herself in purely focusing on the digital tools that we need to do our work. And it's those career paths that actually do exist within the profession because we just need to diversify like everyone else and adapt to the environment we're in. And I think we're uniquely placed to do that. And we collaborate already with so many other disciplines, right? Ecologists, engineers, lighting designers, water specialists, you name it. We pretty much collaborate with everyone in the built environment. And so already you have that exposure to all those skill sets. And I think one of the key takeaway from sort of career that, is probably about halfway now, I think is that ability to just keep on, you adapt slowly, right? Change happens slowly over time. Nothing happens overnight. So there needs to be patience, but also realizing that it doesn't come overnight, but that you also need the right champions above to help you with it, right? It starts with someone seeing the potential in you, and that's what happened, right? I was lucky that David Orr recruited me in Michelle in 2005, so something in me to bring me into the UK. Otherwise, this career would have never started, right? And finding people who have had as mentors over the past 25 years. I've had about 3 or 4, and they've been fundamentally impactful in everything I've done, from understanding who I was quite early on in life through to shaping my career as a leader without ever realizing there was one in there. So I think that ability to seek advice or welcome, or have the attitude that welcomes it, right? Sometimes mentors just materialize themselves. You don't always look for them. It's just being able to see one and nurture that relationship when you come across it. And the best advice I can give to anyone out there is, you might not have one now, but keep an eye out. You don't need to just spend time looking for that person, but just be on the lookout, because when you find it, it will be such an important relationship for the rest of your career.
I think that's a brilliant piece of advice, and it's good that you explained it towards the end, because my next question would be where to find those leaders, because I'm also asking on my own behalf. I'm rather in the early phases of my career myself, and it's so hard sometimes to find the right leaders. Everyone is so extremely busy nowadays. How do you think that people should start looking for the leaders? Because I think that another brilliant piece of advice I got some time ago is that while we go and we look for another place to work, we should actually be looking for the leaders first, not the location, not the name of the company, not the profile. I mean, of course, ideally you would work with something you like, but it should be the leaders that you should be drawn by.
100%. That's a challenging question. So I would say there's obviously 2 types of leaders, right? You've got today's leaders and tomorrow's leaders. And you almost want to find the leaders in waiting as much as the one that is already there, right? So I would say, so there's going to be a few aspects to the answer. The first one is finding a mentor. That mentor doesn't need to be your leader, right? That mentor could be outside of your industry, could be outside of your profession or outside of your city. It's someone who you look up to, who can help you grow personally and professionally. Sometimes the two straddle each other in a very blurred way. But a lot of skills that we use in our professional lives are beyond the technical skills we learn at university, right? That's where really the mentor comes in. It's about helping amplifying all those other attributes, whether it's communication, whether it's coaching, or whether it's pitching, or simply listening, learning how to listen to someone, right? So I think that that ability to find mentors is something that professional institutions can help with. So we've got the example with the Landscape Institutes in the UK. They require a mentor for you to do your chartership. Those mentors can be provided by the institute or sometimes from your own company. And we do have a mentoring program we've put in place in the team. We've got 65, 80, 70% uptake in mentoring in the team beyond chartership, because that's one thing we wanted to put in place quite early on, is recognizing that once you're chartered, the mentoring shouldn't stop. We've put in place a mentoring system that people could sign up to, and a kind of a matchmaking process to help pair people up. We recognize the long-term value those things provide. So I think there are organizations that do recognize the need for that. That's probably the first 2 places where you can start looking if you're looking for a mentor. Your institute and the network that comes with it, and your own company beyond even the immediate teams you're working with, right? Now, in terms of the leader part, in terms of looking for a leader, I would say it comes from being in tune with your own industry. So I'm not saying you need to go to events every week, but being able to, from a range of sources, right? So social media, YouTube, conferences, the entire space.
Urbanism podcasts.
Podcasts, exactly.
Like and subscribe to Urbcast.
You should. And if you haven't already, go back 5 minutes in time and do it. But those things are important to find those people, right? These days, that's how, in part, you're able to listen to what they think. And if you like what they say, then it becomes a lot easier. And it's probably never been easier to find them than it is today. That's one place where technology has been magnificent. There's so many brilliant podcasts, and I've met so many people through LinkedIn, right? I've become friends with people through LinkedIn. It's incredible. It's not just there to find jobs. It's really something that's really powerful, that you can go really quite far with if you use it in the right way. It's not about getting likes. You can use it to seek people just like that. You can seek people with the same values that you're looking for through LinkedIn. And that's probably the biggest tool and I don't know how many people actually use it in that way, but that's probably its hidden power, because I don't think there's any other tool like that would allow you to enable you to find someone in that way.
I like how this soft side dominated our discussion. We didn't talk that much about the technical details of landscape architecture, and that's completely fine, because actually I want to develop this series towards different directions, and I think that this mentoring, seeking for leadership part is extremely important, especially to young people. I think I would love to get this advice 8-10 years ago when I was starting my own studies and looking for where to go. That's so important, and that's why I want to contribute with my podcast in that way. And going towards the end and also recommending some advice, some moral advice even to people, could you recommend a book, something that listeners could check after listening to that discussion?
Books. That's a really good question. So a lot of my books are not about anything to do with this profession. I've got books about climbing. I've got books about running. But I would say books that have had the biggest impact on me, there's definitely some of the early books from Jan Gehl, 100%, Life Between Buildings and a few others. Definitely worthwhile starting there. Jen Jacobs. There's some of the classics, literally start with the classics and work your way back. That's probably the best way to go, because yes, technology has changed how we use cities, but ultimately it's about people. A lot of the great work that's in some of those classics really still stands the test of time quite well. And I would say, because knowledge changes so much, definitely just mix up the knowledge sources, right? Podcast, magazines, ebooks, you name it, newsletters, doesn't matter. It's never been easier to access knowledge. So use it to your advantage. Keep bringing it in different sources, right? And I think there's YouTube channels and the possibilities are endless as far as knowledge is concerned. So don't be stuck to one book. Mix it up.
Ludo, thank you very much for the recommendation and especially for the advice, and also sharing a bit more about how you work at WSP. I hope that, as you said, LinkedIn is this great tool out there, and this discussion will be published on all different streaming platforms, and I will also advertise it in all different social media platforms. So I hope that some people interested in getting to know more can reach out to you.
Absolutely. Always welcome. And it's always great to help share other tips for others in the profession on how they can continue their careers or go into the profession, right? I think there comes a point in life where you realize legacy and impact is what matters. And that's exactly the point I've reached. So no, thank you for inviting me. It's been really good to talk.
Thank you for listening to the newest episode of Urbcast together with Ludo Pittie from WSP. And I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. that was recorded during the Urban Future Conference. You will find more information about the conference itself, but also about Ludovic in the episode description. And if you enjoyed this, if that was useful, please share this episode with someone that also might find it interesting or useful. Have a great summer and talk to you soon.